Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 495 for the 15th of April 2018. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Bushfires. Fires around Sydney. I can see the smoke out of the Skeptic Zone window. It's a bushfire emergency right now. We've had record-breaking temperatures this April. Today's a bit cooler, ironically enough, but there are worrying bushfires about. But apart from the bushfires, what's coming up on this week's show? We're going to start with Maynard's spooky action. Maynard was being particularly spooky yesterday in Sydney, where he joined the March for Science, together with a gaggle of skeptics and a modest crowd, I must admit, this year. Anyway, very interesting speakers, and we marched through the streets of Sydney into Hyde Park, marching for science. Interviews and some highlights from some of the talks, some little snippets coming up with Maynard's spooky action. Then a very nice and short message from the Squaring the Strange podcast. Thank you, Celestia, for organising that. And they're celebrating 1 year of podcasting. Hey, Ben and Pasquale, and Celestia, only 9 more years to go and you'll catch up to the Skeptic Zone. Good luck. Then we have something which is unusual for the Skeptic Zone, different, I guess. It's hard to say. Last week, you will recall, we brought you the story of the naturopath who's been sent to prison for at least 7 months for her part in advising a mother to go on a raw diet, which gravely affected her son. Now, the mother was breastfeeding at the time. The son was very young, a baby. And this had very bad effects on the baby, who lost a lot of weight and was only days away from death when his mother finally took the son to a GP. And we told you that the naturopath Marilyn Bodnar, as we speak, is already into her first week of her sentence, her prison time. Well, I'm going to read out the judge's remarks in sentencing. Now, these remarks are of public record, of course, and it was brought to my attention by our reporter Heidi Robinson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. And I read this determination or the remarks from the judge, and I thought it was so interesting and so insightful that I'm reading it out to you today later on in the show. You can see some of the facts behind this case, some of the thinking the judge would have had to, or his thoughts in considering the sentence that he ultimately imposed. And again, as I said last week, this is hopefully a strong message, a warning to so-called natural therapists out there. And apart from anything else, I hope it gives you a window, a look inside the New South Wales justice system. Well, that's enough for me right now. A short introduction this week. I'm going to run downstairs and have a peanut butter and honey sandwich. Peanut butter and honey sandwich. I shouldn't eat so many peanut butter and honey sandwiches, folks. Oh, that they're so good. Will I do that? I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Hiya, Maynard here. It's the March for Science 2018. This is where we go and look at science. We go, wow, what's that? What's happening there? Who's that? Why is that? And we'll be examining that all here in Martin Place in the Sydney March for Science. Well, I'm just going to have a wander around here to see what's going on, okay? Here we go. Running. Another thing there. There's a person with a hat, guy with a pea hat, person who's got a degree, and a whole bunch of people here. Look, there's people here who have a rainbow thing going on. I'm waving now. I have no credibility because obviously I didn't go to university. And I go back here. There's people thinking with coffee and here's a monument which actually represents the Barry Manilow release of I Can't Smile Without You. It's fantastic. And I'm walking around here, over here. Look, science has solutions. What's going on there? There's a hat, shorts, and a few things here. So normally I could maybe sit here, but unfortunately I never went to university, so I have to get up and wander around. Excuse me, Maynard here from the Skeptic Zone. I noticed, okay. I'm standing next to someone who actually knows what the table of elements means. What are you studying at the moment?
Occupational therapy.
Okay, now what's your favourite element? My element is surprise. What's yours? Gallium.
Carbon.
One of the wacky ones that exists for about 3 seconds in a...
Nah, stick with carbon.
Carbon. She's a carbon fan. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, I'll ask you all now. Thank you very much. Sound person, so stand up, move in towards the middle here because we are about to commence our proceedings for the day. Can I welcome you one and all on yet another record-breakingly, unpleasantly hot April day to the CBD of Sydney for the 2018 March for Science. My name is Adam Spencer. I'm thrilled to be your MC here today. Let's start with a massive round of applause for me because I'm pretty awesome, just to warm you up. Yes. Yay! There you go. Yay! We've got a few speeches before we will walk through this beautiful city of ours, but first of all, to welcome us all to country, please welcome to the stage the wonderful Uncle Alan Madden.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Alan Madden, Gadigal Elder. For my first song, only kidding. Running a bit short in time today, short and sweet and to the point. It's always an honour and pleasure to welcome one and all the country. Where we are today is Gadigal. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our Aboriginal elders, all elders, past and present, and pay my respects to all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters. From whatever Aboriginal or island nation you may have come from, welcome to Gadigal. And to all our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters here today, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal, no matter where you've come from.
So I went and read this story. Have any of you read Cinderella? It is a heart-wrenching story, but there's lots we can learn about it. And I think in some ways, science is the new Cinderella. Did you know Cinderella was called Cinderella because she slept in the ashes, in the cinders, and she was living in the coal-powered fireplace. Do you ever worry that our country, Australia, is covered in ashes and that we should be cleaning it out and closing down the inefficient coal-powered fire stations? And we can do...
And of Wiradjuri background. In my search, I learned that there's a great celestial emu called Gugurman in Wiradjuri language that indicates when emu eggs are available and ready to go collect. There are also stars that show seasonal change. As well as that, and one of the most amazing things that I found were songlines, paths in the sky that show you the way on the ground that are now used in the New South Wales highway system. Now, people often think that Aboriginal astronomy is just a bunch of star stories, almost like astrology, but that is a very common misconception. Thinly veiled within these star stories are many lessons about Aboriginal law, how to find food, and astronomical concepts. There is a deep astronomical knowledge
understanding of the world around us, based on evidence. This involves observation, pattern recognition, logic, prediction, and skepticism. However, Indigenous science is holistic and often seeks localised explanations. These could be used to help mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Here on the stage, I just want to say to all of you in the crowd, you're looking fantastic. In particular, those of you who went to the trouble of bringing along some banners. There's some great banners here. I see basic science, not BS. I see I'm a STEMinist. I see up an atom, like it on a couple of levels. Time to react here, got your little beaker there. The one that I like the very most, however, just over there, can you hold that one up? Alternative facts are square root of -1. Yeah? You don't mean complex, do you? No. Imaginary. Get it? The Argandite. Tough crowd today. I also want to give a big round of applause, but we will do it in the Auslan way, for the wonderful Danny, who's been Auslan interpreting today. If you don't know, the Auslan round of applause is hands above your head like that.
Well, I'm here with a few people. I'm here with Jessica. How are you?
I'm extremely well, thank you.
Now, what do you think was what was the big moment for March for Science this year?
The big moment, the point about not having a science minister, which means that we're pretty much directionless in terms of good science policy in government.
I thought John Singleton was our science minister. I've got the wrong guy.
Oh.
Where do you get it?
I'd have to check that.
Actually, if we could have a science minister, who would be the best person, you think?
Oh, that's a big one.
Jeffrey Robinson, I reckon, would be kind of cool. He's a cool guy. Yep.
He's a cool guy.
Now, the march is going to come down here, and people are going to go bang, 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 science. They're going to do some waveforms. They're going to do some very serious stuff, and they will pass us by, and I'll be looking confused. So look out for that, people. Here we see the 2018 March for Science. What are they marching for? Well, a whole bunch of stuff that you go to uni to learn, like gallium. And by the way, I'm wearing the elements here. What is my favourite element? The element of surprise. See, love that, because I didn't do an arts, and that's the best I could do. Anyway, here they go. Here we go. I'm going to walk here. Here I am, walking along as if I went to Newcastle University for longer than the day. These people spent 3 years there, some of them even longer. Yes, it's the March for Science, because science has just been put in the gutter, tramped on, made like a paper aeroplane and flown into the corner of the room and beaten up. But this is a very important thing. Look at these people. Look, marching for science. These people are a lot smarter than me, let me tell you. Every single one. Goose, non-goose. Not to be confused with mongoose. Non-goose. Yeah, it goes like, what do we want? Proof of the Heisenberg principle, because it's difficult. Not a great chant, but it works for me. And here comes that's the Heisenberg principle. Congratulations. Yes, here's some skeptics here. Who we got here?
It's Ian Bryce.
And?
Nick Andrew.
Look, now both of you are marching for science. I've been marching for the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and really hasn't worked out for me.
I'm pretty sure you've been...
Because no one knows where I am.
Principle. Yes.
And what's your favourite moment of science? Because you're a physics guy. What's your thing?
Okay, well, I like general relativity. That's what I lecture in at the moment to adult colleges. So the warping of space-time is my favourite. I use a banana to illustrate the effect of black holes creating gravitational
waves. Are you just Newtonians? Fine, because as we look around, the Newtonian stuff just fine. You and your bloody Einstein stuff.
That's so 1800s Newtonian stuff.
Well, that's true.
1600s.
That's true. And what's your moment of science you love?
Well, I haven't mastered general relativity yet, but I think I'm pretty cool with special theory of relativity. I think I've got that under wraps.
What's the difference?
Well, special theory is... much more special.
Okay. So have either of you had a bit of a chat with a flat earther conspiracy person at all?
One of my Twitter friends, Andrew Skegg, is currently engaged in fighting the flat earth, and I'm not sure if he's convinced anybody about the earth being actually an oblate spheroid yet, but it's just a sad reflection on society today that there is a bunch of people out there who actually believe this nonsense.
And what's your favourite science busting you like to do?
Science busting?
Yeah, what do you like to do? Hey, that's wrong.
Oh, God, people who say you can't prove there isn't a God. Well, I say, well, I do in my lectures pretty well.
Well, you can't really prove a negative, so you're out there doing...
You can indeed.
Can you?
Yes, the rule book of physics.
But don't you have to cover everything if you're going to, prove a negative?
Science has covered everything pretty well. In the here and now, in this, everything since the Big Bang has been explained pretty well by science, and there are no gaps through which a God could intervene, any God, on this here and now on planet Earth. So that can be backed up in an hour or so.
So you're saying the love of Jesus Christ in your heart that you think goes bahum is just a weird feeling?
Well, there are so many different gods.
and they all hate each other. So how can they all be right? So it's much safer to be a secularist. That's why I'm in the secular party.
What's the female goddess that does the battlefield stuff? Freya. That's mine. Yeah, Freya. She's cool. Yeah.
Freya's the Germanic.
Yeah. The speed of light after the Big Bang.
Doesn't matter. No, it's not going faster. Well, relativity says that if you take a measurement, you'll get a result less than the speed of light. Theoretically, the far parts of the universe are going faster than the speed of light.
Oh.
But if you take a measurement, they'll be less than the speed of light.
So I'm wandering along with Ian, and he's telling me some physics stuff. So here's the thing. When you're walking along with someone who knows quantum physics, what you do is you just nod quietly and pretend you understand what's being said. And you say stuff like, oh, Planck time. And like, oh, look at that. Isn't that a nice car? Wow, I wouldn't have thought he's doing that. And then you go, oh, look at that. Well, here we are. The people have gathered in the park. It's all gone just a bit sciencey. There's a whole bunch of people hanging around, talking, saying stuff. And over here, there's a few of the regular skeptics. Hello, Maynard here. Like, what do you think of this year's March for Science?
Oh, it's, there's people here. It's modest. There we go. It's modest.
Okay. So what was your favourite moment?
Well, the speeches were pretty good at the beginning. We heard from some excellent speakers, I think, some people that were very, very passionate about science. It was good hearing from Kristen Banks.
Oh, but again, pharmacology gets missed out. Not one mention of MDMA, not a mention of that at all. No mention of dexamphetamine, nothing.
Because it's still objectively early on a Saturday, so
fair enough, that's true. Yeah.
People are still recovering.
So
they're
actually,
rehydrating.
Now, when you look around, you actually know science. So what part of science do you think these people will be working on? Are they
anything
nurses
and everything?
Or
No, anything and everything. I reckon we've definitely got physicists, we've got astrophysicists, we've got climate scientists, we've definitely got some biologists. I think we've got a pretty decent spectrum. There's even mathematicians, but is that a science?
Now, behind me is someone who's a lot smarter than me. His name's Adam Spencer. I've spoken to him before. Hi, Adam. How are you?
That's me.
That's you.
How are you, buddy?
Oh, pretty good.
Your periodic table of the elements T-shirt.
What's your favourite element? Gallium, bit of Americonium, one of the ones that only lasts for about 3 seconds.
Carbon goes pretty good.
Carbon. He's a carbon guy. Why is that?
Well, because obviously...
smell it in the barbecue.
Carbon's got a bit of a bad rap at the moment with its involvement in CO2. Carbon is the basis of life. It's all there in these magical little map here. The incredible amount of human thought that table represents. That you can build a basic table that explains the structure of almost all the stuff in the universe.
That's true. And there's nitrous oxide too, which is fantastic.
Exactly. You can't complain about the old nitrous oxide, my friend.
Yeah. And what did you feel when you were actually chatting to the people at the March for Science, out about the crowd, and they were looking at you? Well, how were you feeling there? Was it like wild? What was going on?
It's just great to be in a group who are united by a common belief in the power of the human mind to think rationally, approach our problems, get a greater understanding of the universe and what we should do.
And what's your favourite discipline in science? What is it? Come on.
Mathematics. The more pure the mathematics, the less application to the real world, the better as far as I'm concerned.
That means he likes physics, and that's when I disconnected with science, because I got to equations and physics and it scared me.
I'll tell you something incredible about physics, okay? In 1932, a guy called Chadwick discovers the neutron. So it's in 1932 that we get that model of the atom that we all saw. It's going to remember the protons and the neutrons in the middle and the electrons. We learnt that in 1932. So from the beginning of humans, whatever you want to call human, thinking, whatever you want to call thinking, whether that's 200,000 years or 2 million years or whatever, asking the most fundamental question, what is stuff? It takes us all of that time, up to 1932, to get 3 fundamental particles. Today, one lifetime onwards, from 32 to 2018, we've gone from 3 fundamental particles to 61 fundamental particles. This is the age of physics. There's just this explosion in knowledge at the cutting edge of that sort of stuff that we've jumped forward 20 times as far as we had in all human history in the last lifetime.
Look, I know you've got a lot of people to meet and shake hands for science and that, but how do you go with quantum physics? Because you have a big brain for maths, and that is just, out of the park. How do you go with that?
The idea that
makes no sense.
No, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It makes no sense to our limited brains, but we know at least some of it must be right. So the challenge then becomes for us to throw our brains at the topic and get better at it. But the fact that our minds can even perceive the fact that there's a quantum size of things in a quantum world in which it appears as though particles can be in two places at the one time, or things can talk to each other, not really quickly, but instantly, and we don't know how the information transfers. Mind-blowing, but at the same time, how blessed are we to be the only life form on this planet that can even conceive of it?
And for people out there that, like from Birmingham Gardens in Newcastle and going, what's this bloody science thing? What's the best way in one sentence you can explain why science is important to them?
The essence of being human is to look at the universe and understand wonder what's going on. Of all the different tools we have in the toolkit, science is profoundly the best way to understand the questions we all want the answers to.
Should I be embarrassed that I don't know much about it because I haven't got a great brain?
One, you do have an amazing brain. Secondly,
not for maths, but man, I tell you,
never too late to start, my friend.
Remember that. Thank you, Adam. Well, that's it for the March for Science. Zombie up, zombie down, zombie out of town. I'm just hiding up the rude bit, which is that's science. Basically, have a look, that's enough there. It's a bit like Can't Stop the Music. If the village people were a fountain, that would be it. If we were at a March for Science, this is it. I'm just going to go and learn some stuff, and hopefully I can pretend I was at university for more than the day. Oh, yeah.
This is Ben Radford.
And Celestia Ward.
And Pascual Romero from the podcast Squaring the Strange.
We talk monsters, mysteries, fallacies, and the latest in woo.
We also do deep dives into topics that might not appear to be a skeptical subject on the surface.
Yep, topics like fairy tales, psychology, treasure hunting, trolls, and even heavy metal.
Heavy metal! We just celebrated our 1 year on the air with over 55,000 downloads from listeners all over the world.
To celebrate, Ben gave us flying metal pig sculptures. Not as cool as origami ones, but still pretty neat.
I named mine Francis Bacon. Anyway, we've also done a lot of upgrading over the last year. We record through the latest in studio gear, including a brand new rack mount compressor gate with autodynamic attack and release controls, true RMS power summing, XLR and TRS inputs and outputs, top-of-the-line gate timing algorithms.
Pascual, what does any of that even mean?
I don't know, but the lights are pretty.
They are. They're blinking and everything. It's awesome. It's like the latest in ghost hunting gear. And of course, Celestia is now a co-host, on top of doing editing, producing, and sending out skeptic rates.
I'm also a cat herder. Thank you, Richard, for being so supportive of the show and helping us grow beyond anything we could have done ourselves. You and the Skeptic Zone are an inspiration, and we wouldn't have made it this far without you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Here's a follow-up to the story we brought you last week about the naturopath, Marilyn Bodnar, being sentenced to 14 months imprisonment with a 7-month non-parole period. I thought I would read you the judgment handed down, and this comes to us from the District Court of New South Wales, and this was handed down by Judge Berman. Sentence 1. Many people in the community shun conventional medicine. Others regard alternative medical treatment as being complementary to conventional medicine. The criminal law does not often get involved in the choice of a person to give or accept advice based on alternatives to conventional medicine. Thus, people are perfectly entitled to portray themselves as being able to cure illnesses through the placement of crystals on the body, the use of highly diluted solutions, and the eating of activated almonds. 2. But the criminal law does get involved when harm results from dangerous advice and where gross recklessness in the giving of such advice leads to a significant risk of death. Those who purport to be qualified to give medical advice, whether doctors or not, have an obligation to provide advice which is based on proved results, not merely fake science and faith. and those who give advice with the potential to harm others have an obligation to ensure that continued acceptance of that advice does not lead, as in this case, to a real possibility that the well-meaning but seriously misguided advice causes the risk of death of an innocent child. 3. In this case, the advice given by the offender, Marilyn Bodnar, to the mother of a child with eczema almost led to that child's death. The advice should probably never been given in the first place, but the fact that Ms. Bodnar continued to give that advice in the face of evidence of the harm that was being caused, and in the absence of Ms. Bodnar's monitoring of the condition of the child, meant that it was seriously criminal behaviour to continue giving such flawed advice. 4. The protection of children from harm is one of the most important aspects of the criminal law, and where offences are committed against children, principles of general deterrence are usually of considerable importance. That principle is one to which full weight should be given in this sentencing exercise, and it explains the sentence I will ultimately impose on the offender. 5. Before proceeding, I will remind those present that there is to be no publication of any evidence which will identify or tend to identify the name of the child. For the purposes of this judgment, I will give him the pseudonym Tony. 6. He was born in early October 2014. When he was 4 months old, he was found to be developing at a normal pace but diagnosed with eczema. A specialist saw him on the 23rd of February 2015. The specialist explained that the eczema could not be cured, only treated. The specialist provided appropriate advice to Tony's mother and booked him in for a skin prick test to test for allergens. An appointment was made to discuss the results with this test, but that appointment was cancelled by Tony's mother. 7. It was around this time that Tony's mother was introduced to Ms. Bodnar, the offender. Ms. Bodnar must have seemed as something of a godsend to her because Ms. Bodnar told her that she could cure Tony's eczema, something which the specialist said could not be done. No evidence in these proceedings was tendered in any attempt to prove the accuracy of the offender's claim to have the ability to do what the specialist could not, namely, cure Tony's eczema. 8. Ms. Bodnar's explanation for Tony's eczema was that it could have been caused by the mother's diet and toxins in her body. Accordingly, Ms. Bodnar advised, and the mother accepted, that she should go on a, quote, raw-only, end quote, diet. 9. From around the 10th of April 2015, the mother began to follow Ms. Bodnar's advice, ceased conventional medical treatment for her son's eczema, and took up a raw food diet. 10. This treatment contributed to the serious harm later suffered by Tony. Not surprisingly, the mother lost weight and, given that she was breastfeeding Tony exclusively, so did he. The mother lost 11 kilos, and incidentally that's about 24 pounds, and Tony, who was only around 6 months of age at the time, lost 1.4 kilos. Miss Bodnar was aware of this weight loss, but assured the mother that this was normal and that Tony was fat and needed to lose weight. 11. In early to mid-May, things got worse. Tony began having higher temperatures. Remarkably, Miss Bodnar advised the mother to fast and to go on a water-only diet. I repeat, Tony was being exclusively breastfed at the time. 12. The situation reached a critical stage on or around the 21st of May 2015 when Tony was unsettled. His mother believed he needed more food. Miss Bodnar suggested that she could give him some goat's milk, but when the mother tried this, Tony vomited it up. Miss Bodnar suggested that the mother try to dilute the goat's milk with water and try again, but Tony vomited that also. 13. Eventually, and thankfully, the mother took Tony to her general practitioner. She told the GP that she had been advised by a naturopath to have an exclusion diet for herself and to avoid introducing any solids to the baby in an attempt to control the eczema. The doctor found that Tony was in a shrunken state with loss of body fat and muscles. He appeared to be dehydrated. The doctor referred Tony to the Children's Hospital, where he was found to be in a critical condition, the doctors forming the opinion that had he not presented to the hospital, he could have died within a number of days. 14. He had lost a lot of weight. At 6 months of age, he weighed 8 kilograms, but on admission at 7.5 months, weighed only 6.4 kilograms. There was evidence of a developmental delay, which correlated with the mother taking Ms. Bodnar's advice. His development at 8 months was assessed as being equivalent to that of a 3-month-old. He remained in hospital for more than a month. He still needs to be assessed by medical experts over the next few years in order to ascertain whether or not he will suffer any long-term developmental delays as a result of what has happened to him. 15. As a result of what I have described, the offender has pleaded guilty to having aided, abetted, counselled, or procured the commission of an offence by the child's mother, that being an offence of being a person having parental responsibility recklessly and without reasonable excuse failing to provide Tony with the necessities of life, the result of that failure causing a danger of death to Tony. This is an offence which carries a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment. 16. This is an objectively serious example of crimes of this type. Particularly important in making that assessment are the length of time over which the offence occurred, the 22nd of February 2015 to the 22nd of May 2015, the gross recklessness of the offender in firstly providing such advice to the mother, but perhaps more importantly failing to observe or perhaps ignoring the effect of that advice upon Tony, and, of course, the age of Tony is a matter of some importance as well. It's not as though Tony was able to feed himself. 17. The offender pleaded guilty to this charge not at the earliest opportunity, but not at the latest opportunity either. The procedural history is somewhat complicated, but it is agreed between the parties that the sentence I impose upon the offender should be about 15% less than it would otherwise have been. 18. The offender is a mature woman of 62 years of age. She has a close, healthy relationship with her 2 children and her husband. After finishing high school, she qualified as a registered nurse, continuing her training so that she qualified in emergency post-procedural procedures, and then as a midwife in 1978. 19. In that year, at age 22, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. This proved benign, but the undoubted crisis in her life that arose at this time led to her developing an interest in good diet and alternative therapies. 20. She studied naturopathy before, in 1983, establishing her own business. She offered massage services, gave diet advice, and ran cooking classes treating children as well as adults. There is no evidence to suggest anyone else has been harmed by the treatments she offered. Now, if I could make a quick comment here, as I told you last week, Marilyn Bodnar was actually sent to trial in the 80s over the death of a friend or a client. However, she was acquitted or found not guilty. So with my limited legal knowledge, I imagine that when this judge says there is no evidence to suggest anyone else has been harmed by the treatments she offered, he must have taken into consideration that she was found not guilty. So in the eyes of the law, she was not guilty of any previous offences. We read on. 21. The offender has provided a letter of apology to the court and expressed her remorse. She says that she never intended her suggestions to cause any harm to Tony or the mother. This is easily accepted. Ms. Bodnar is not charged with being an accessory to any offence involving intentional harm to Tony. 22. Ms. Bodnar has no relevant legal convictions, the only offences in her criminal history being driving offences committed in 2008 and 2013. There is no doubt that she is a caring and well-meaning individual, and that her intentions to provide advice to Tony's mother were based on what she believed to be some connection between Tony's eczema and the mother's diet. But once it became clearly apparent that there was a risk of harm to Tony through the mother following her advice, it was a seriously criminal thing to do to ignore the effect of her advice on Tony's well-being. 23. In submissions from Mr. Mitri, who appeared for the offender today, the offender sought to gain comfort from the fact that she never saw Tony in the state revealed by photographs tendered to the Crown. But this is part of the criminality of the offender in continuing to advise a restricted diet for Tony's mother without seeing Tony and without seeing just how obviously ill he was. 24. I accept that Miss Bodnar has suffered significantly since the matters came to light. Her business has suffered. She has been subject to ongoing restrictions imposed by the Health Care Complaints Commission. She has been the subject of abuse on social media. She has been extremely stressed over a number of years, such stress resulting in symptoms of anxiety and depression and being displaced. 25. I should at this stage speak about the sentence imposed upon Tony's mother. The principles of parity clearly apply. For that reason, I was provided with materials tendered to the magistrate who sentenced Tony's mother, as well as His Honour's remarks on the sentence. The magistrate imposed a sentence of imprisonment of 14 months, but suspended its execution under S12 of the Crimes Sentencing Procedure Act. 26. It is to be noted that the magistrate clearly identified the reason that a sentence of full-time imprisonment was not imposed. He said, quote, "In my view, but for the offer and willingness on the part of the defendant to agree to give evidence against the co-accused, a period of full-time imprisonment would have been otherwise appropriate." End quote. 27. This offender, who does not get the benefit of a discount under S23 of the Crimes Sentencing Procedure Act, cannot really complain, therefore, if a sentence of full-time imprisonment is imposed upon her, especially given that Mr. Mitri accepts that the criminality of Tony's mother and his client is similar. Of course, the Crown can't rely on the principles of parity, but in my view, the offender would not have a justifiable sense of grievance were I to ultimately impose a sentence of full-time imprisonment upon her. 28. I will take into account that this is a matter that could have been dealt with in a local court. As it turns out, the sentence I impose upon Miss Bodnar does not exceed the jurisdictional limit of that court. 29. I accept that the principles of specific deterrence have little part to play. The evidence would suggest that Miss Bodnar is unlikely to commit a similar offence in the future, even if she were to be in a position to do so. But as I began those remarks on sentence, general deterrence is of great significance. Children, such as the child in this matter, are defenceless and vulnerable, particularly so when they are entirely dependent upon others for their nutrition and welfare. 30. Well-intentioned but seriously misguided advice is, as the facts of this case demonstrate, capable of causing great harm and even death to vulnerable children. Those giving such advice need to have it made clear to them that if they give such advice, they need to make sure that it is not going to do harm, and if they continue to give such advice, they need to continue to ensure that no harm is being caused. 31. It is a serious matter, but not necessarily a crime, to tell a breastfeeding mother to restrict her diet. It is even more serious when such advice continues after being told that both the mother and the child have lost weight. And it is serious indeed and highly criminal for such advice to continue to the state where a child was at risk of death within a few days, in circumstances where the person giving the advice hadn't even seen the state the child was in as a result of his or her advice being followed. 32. As part of his submissions, Mr. Mitri relied on a decision of a judge of this court when sentencing an offender for a charge of failure of a person with parental responsibility to provide appropriate care. This is an unusual matter, and I mean no criticism of Mr. Mitri at all when I say that he was relying on a single case. I am sure that it is the only case he could find. But it remains the case that a single decision by another judge of this court says very little indeed, if anything, about the sentence I should impose in the present case. 33. I accept, of course, that sentences of imprisonment are very much sentences of last resort. It is a serious thing to do to send a 62-year-old woman with no criminal history to jail for the first time, but I am satisfied that no other form of sentence would reflect the object gravity of her conduct and the need to deter others who may also give well-meaning but misguided advice of a medical nature which has the potential to cause great harm and even death. 34. There are special circumstances in this case, relating not only to this being the offender's first time in custody, but also her age and the fact that she is displaying symptoms of anxiety and depression. 35. I impose sentence as follows. I set a non-parole period of 7 months and a head sentence of 14 months to date from today, 5th of April 2018. The non-parole period will expire on the 4th of November 2018. Now, I will link to that judgment in this week's show notes so you can peruse those for yourself, but I found that absolutely fascinating to read that out. And in fact, I was learning a lot as I was reading it to you. And I think it is a very important judgment to have. I think we shall be referring to this in the future. And as I said last week, it sends a strong message to natural therapists that they are legally responsible for the care of their patients or their clients. A fascinating insight into the workings of our legal system here in Australia, and a very important case for science and reason. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you to those people who came along for the March for Science. It's always good to march through the city streets, especially with Maynard in tow, and especially marching for science. And thank you, Adam Spencer, for taking time out to talk to Maynard. Coming up on next week's show, Dr. Paulie returns with her random rant, and she's going to be interviewing somebody about climate change and climate change arguments. An interesting perspective, a skeptical perspective. That is to say, not a climate change skeptic, but somebody who has looked at all the arguments and figured out some good rebuttals. Also next week, we're going to be bringing you news of a vaccination clinic coming up, which may interest people in Sydney. And soon on the Skeptic Zone, we're going to be starting a series of interviews with speakers who are going to appear at the upcoming Australian Skeptics National Convention later this year, in October, I think. And bit by bit, we'll be bringing you those interviews. And we look forward to meeting all these people in person, of course, later on in the year for the Skeptics Convention. More details over the coming months. Now, as I look outside the window, yeah, it's still a bit of smoke out there. It's strange, you know, you get these smoky, you can smell it in the air too, from fires that are burning on the outskirts of Sydney. I hope that doesn't get more serious. Is that climate change? This hot, this late in the year? Probably. Well, on that unsettling note, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.